What's the scariest thing that's happened while you were home alone? Technically I wasn't home alone, but everyone had gone to bed, so I was the only one up. It was like midnight around Christmas, and I was on my laptop in the living room. I was just thinking about going to bed when I heard the softest little knock on our glass door, so soft my dog doesn't even hear it and react. My area has lots of animals around, so I look up expecting to see a stray dog or something like that. An older man is at my back door looking in. I freeze up for a moment and just stare. He doesn't seem to see me, despite me being right there, and turns to talk to someone off the porch I can't see, while messing with my door. At that point I start screaming for my dad. Dude finally hears/sees me and had taken off running by the time my family woke up. 911 is called, and like 8 unmarked cars full of police officers show up literally instantly. It was really surprising. Next day, they found out the reason they showed up so quickly was because that dude was probably someone they were looking for who had escaped from them a few moments before. So that's nice. When I was about 11, my sister's ex broke into our home while my family was out. I go downstairs to check it out and see this scrawny, scowling kid crying while trying to make his way up through the basement. When he saw me at first, he tried to calm me down and then pleaded with me not to tell my parents, eventually threatening me if I did. I know that a crying, hysterical high school freshman doesn't sound intimidating, but as a kid he was like twice my size and his emotional state really freaked me out. It ended when my fat old dog, hearing the commotion, came to check things out and went into full-on lol I'm gonna faking murder you mode and chased him out of the house and into the yard. My parents found out. Cops were called, charges were pressed, but as my mom explained it, the kid was shown some mercy because he was just that pathetic. We both still live in the same town, so keeping tabs on the dude became a bit of a morbid fascination for me over the years. He's never really changed and has consistently been a sad sack loser his entire life. When I was at uni, my housemates and I lived in a really sketchy area. One weekend, all 3 of them were away, and I was home alone. Shortly after going to bed, I was woken out of a dead sleep to a sound I couldn't place. There was banging, not the good kind, crashing, and all sorts of commotion coming from the top floor. Definitely someone or something up there. I happened to have a butterfly knife in my bedside cabinet, nightstand, and grabbed it, deciding I would be brave and deal with the problem. I was a short, skinny 19-year-old woman with no strength. Also no clothing, because I didn't think to get dressed with all the adrenaline. Crept up the stairs and discovered the noise, which was getting louder and more frantic, was coming from my housemate's room. Called out, no answer. Eventually plucked up the courage to turn the door handle, stepped back and nudged the door with my foot, only to have whatever was in that room come flying straight out at me. Literally flying. It was a faking pigeon. Took a couple of hours to get the faking thing out of the window that had been left open and then calm down enough to go back to bed. So it turned out not to be a scary thing, but the whole process of trying to find out who/what was in my house was pretty terrifying while it was happening. The very first summer I was old enough to be home alone. During the summer, I was in my room watching TV and being generally lazy when my room was enveloped in this bullet-quick flash of lightning, and what followed was, to date, the loudest noise I have ever heard. An explosion that shook my house. I was shook for a good few minutes after that thunder roared, but I stayed in bed. Well, after a few minutes, I started to notice something outside of my window. It looked like a cloud creeping over my house. I couldn't piece together what it was, so I left my room and started to head downstairs. That's when I saw the emergency lights all flashing off the portraits at the bottom of the stairs. When I got downstairs, there was only one view from the windows at the front of the house, the neighbor's house across the street, almost completely engulfed by flames. I'm convinced no ghost or thief or thing that goes bump in the night is half as scary as the powerlessness I felt when I realized a storm can just randomly erase your house from the foundation up, and there's no shit you can do about it. And if the fire is big enough, there's not shit your neighbors can do about it either. I called my mom in a panic, worried the storm, which was still lingering, would hit our house next or something. We live in a nice upper middle class suburb in Ohio. Last April a 6'4" 300-pound dude walked in my front door and started telling me I know what you did to your wife, and then tried to get me to drive him somewhere, literally anywhere. Then he started talking about a bunch of nonsense ranging from completely nonsensical phrases to uber religious nonsense about the end of days. My son got home from school while I was dealing with this, and I had him call 911 and run to his friend's house. I had left my cell phone out of reach. The cops finally came and arrested him and took him straight to the hospital. I was able to follow up with the police and the guy's mom a few days later when she came to pick up his truck. Apparently he has a history of mental issues and was septic, which made his mental break worse. The police asked if I wanted to press charges since it was legally a burglary, and I obviously declined because the guy clearly didn't have any kind of nefarious motive. My son still has some issues dealing with it and gets kind of paranoid when left home alone. He's 13. It was that moment for him when you realize that you're not immune to bad things happening. I'm living in a college apartment with a friend. Quite a while ago I ended up staying there for a weekend by myself, though I had originally planned to head home and work my part-time job as I normally do. Anyway, I was the only one in the house on this particular night when I heard a bang and the sound of wood on wood. Thinking I must have left a window open and it was just the breeze slamming the door in the kitchen or something, I went to go close it, except that door was still open and all the windows were already closed. Now I was a little spooked, but I was determined to find out what could have made that noise. So I could calm down, go to bed and laugh about how silly I was for getting scared. But as I was walking back through the hall connecting my room to the kitchen/living room, I found it. The thick wooden panel that accessed the attic, which would only be used for maintenance, but was connected to all apartments on that floor and the hall outside, had been pulled up. At this point I decided that it would be safer if I just stayed in my room and locked the door until morning. The next morning, of course, I found blood smeared across the top of my door, so that was fun. I know this sounds made up and over dramatic, I 100% agree, but unfortunately there's proof. Okay, so a little background before I go to the day of me being scared shitless home alone. I was living with my ex and his mother and stepfather. The house is relatively small. I'm a light sleeper and wake up constantly throughout the night. While I was living there, almost every night I got woken up by the sound of a baby crying, and almost every morning I asked my ex if he heard it last night. Nope, he slept like a faking log. I assumed it was one of the neighbors taking their little kid or baby outside at night. That's what it sounded like, since it didn't really sound like it was coming from inside the house. I was complaining once about how I couldn't sleep because of the baby crying, and he said no babies, all the neighbors are old people. Great. But my mind didn't automatically jump to like, oh my god, ghost. Because logically it was more likely one of them must babysit a grandkid or something. So one day I'm at the house by myself in a room on the second floor. I hear walking around downstairs. I assume my ex's mom must be home, so I go downstairs to say hi, but no one's there. Remember, this house is pretty small, 3 rooms on the bottom floor and 2 rooms on the top floor. There's not a lot of places to disappear to. I thought, oh, she must have gone back out. I go upstairs and hear walking around again. I go downstairs. Nothing. Repeat this a few more times because now I'm convinced there's someone in the house. So I lock myself in the bedroom. I hear the sound of a baby crying again. Then charging up the stairs like a heavy man sprinting. Then nothing. Total silence. No walking. I have my phone in my hand ready to call 911 when I open my bedroom door and nobody is there. Again, I need to emphasize that this is a very small house, so it's not like, oh, I must have just missed them on the way to another room. I asked everyone later if they were home during the day and they all said no. A few nights later, when I was lying awake at night, 100% awake, playing on my phone, I heard something coming up the stairs again. It opened our bedroom door, and I saw a red distorted face for a solid 10-ish seconds before it faking turned around and walked back down the stairs. To this day I 100% believe it was a ghost or something in the house messing with me. I never told anyone else living there because I knew they would think I was crazy. I was in 4th grade when I thought a man broke into my house. I use the word thought because a man was definitely in my house, but he was allowed to be there. Lol. I stayed home from school sick, had a fever, and my mom took me to the doctor. Got antibiotics and we lived in such a small town. Mom asked if I wanted to stay home while she ran back to the pharmacy to get my meds. It was 5 minutes from the house, so I told her I'd be fine on the couch. Also, early 90s, so no cell phones, and we had one house phone in the kitchen. She left. A few minutes later our doorbell rang. I looked out the window and saw a man, and I assumed he'd leave if no one answered. I saw the door was locked, so I started walking back to the couch. But I had a bad feeling, so I'd already taken off my shoes, so he couldn't hear me walking, and I stepped in the doorway of our stairs that go to the basement and waited. I heard him turning the knob and walked down a few steps. Then he opened the door and I bolted down to the basement. I could hear him walking above me. Our basement had doors that went to our backyard, so I went outside. It was 40 degrees, raining, and I had a temp of 105. As I was standing in the side yard, in my PJs and socks looking at all the houses around us, and trying to remember who had little kids and would be home, my mom drove up. She was immediately asking what the fuck I was doing, and all I could do was cry and point at our house saying, "A man is in there." The man. Cue laughter. She walked in. Dude was very confused why the lights and TV were on and no one was home. Since she was taking care of me, she'd forgotten that she scheduled a meeting with an appraiser because, unknown to me at the time, we were moving to another state and they were selling our house. He had a key. Funny now, faking horrifying at the time. I wasn't alone, but was with my 2 kids, while my boyfriend at the time was out with friends. I kept hearing this banging noise out the back. The kids had gone to bed, and after going outside to investigate I assumed it was just my dog, so I let her in and put her in the bathroom, where her bed and everything was. It seemed to stop after that. That was until I woke up at around 1:30 to the banging very definitely inside the house. Absolutely sheeting myself, I rang my boyfriend crying and whispering telling him to come home right away because there was someone in the house. I could hear the banging going on while I was on the phone like things were being thrown around in my lounge. He was already on his way home, so he pulled up to the house like 1 minute later and ran through the house, came into the room, and told me nobody was there. I got up to investigate, and to prove I wasn't crazy haha, noticed a vase and a photo frame on the floor in the living room, and when I looked up to the shelf where they had been there was one of my ex's 6-foot pythons. The banging it heard at like 7 PM was the snakes escaping from their tank in the back room. We found the other one inside the dryer. Thank God my kid's bedroom door was closed, and the dog was in the bathroom. Snakes are one of my biggest fears, but I was so relieved to see that snake on the shelf after convincing myself I was about to be murdered. I've posted this before in the last home intruder thread, and a few people got a kick out of it. Here's a story of how I was fully prepared to kill a man with a sword because he tried to break in and scared my cat. I live in an apartment on the 2nd floor. The landing to my front door has these giant, old metal stairs that clank and ring as you walk up them, and I can almost always tell when a visitor is here about 30 seconds before they knock. On top of it, my cat has memorized the footsteps of the neighbor who shares the landing with me, as well as that of my friends who come over the most. If it's anyone he doesn't recognize, he'll usually bolt and hide. Last winter I was relaxing at home on my night off. It was pretty late, I think it was closer to midnight, if not past it, and I was playing video games in my PJs. Out of the blue, my cat bolts across the living room, and I instantly know someone's at the bottom of the stairs. I take off my headphones and listen, but whatever my cat hears, I can't. Then, after a few seconds, I hear it, footsteps, purposely light, coming off of the stairs, and stepping onto the landing. I stand up, giving it the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe it's just my neighbor trying to be courteous coming home so late. Then the doorknob jiggles, and my cat flies across the room again so swiftly that he tears a hole in my blinds trying to hide. The knob jiggles again, more violently, and then there's a loud thud as whoever is on the other side tries to break the door down with their body. At this point I am, understandably, terrified shitless. I'm a young woman in my 20s, living alone. Someone is trying to break down my door, and I have no weapons, or so I thought. Because at that exact moment, my fight or flight kicked in, and without even thinking about it, without telling my body to or even really controlling it, I found myself diving for the closest possible thing I could use to defend myself with, a moth-faking sword. More specifically, it's a dulled, very poorly made replica Lord of the Rings sword. I think it was supposed to be Andoril, but the end of it is very pointy, and the rest of it is very heavy, and I'm very mad at whoever is on the other side of that door for scaring my cat. So I grabbed it, unsheathing it as I ran, and approached the door. I threw my weight against the door, and looked through the peephole. On the other side of it is a very large man in a hoodie, with the hood pulled up to cover his face. He's alternatively jiggling the lock, and bashing the door with his shoulder. I clear my throat, then bellow in the deepest squeak I can manage. "Can I faking help you, dude?" Freezes. He looks up at the door. Then he says something that, despite the adrenaline rushing through me, despite the fact that I'm bracing the door with a faking sword in my hands, still makes me laugh to this very day. Yeah, I live here. Excuse me. No, you don't. What the fuck? Dude, I live here. No, dude, I'm pretty sure you don't. You sure? Is this really happening? Am I really having this conversation with the burglar trying to break into my apartment while I'm holding a sword? Yes, because I'm in here and you're out there and the door's locked. Oh, okay, sorry, buddy, you don't live here. You need to leave. He looks so dejected I almost want to let him in, give him my laundry money, and tell him to try his luck somewhere else. He turns around and makes his way across the landing. Then he stops short, turns around again, and approaches the door. "Hey, does Johnny live here?" "No dude, there's no one named Johnny here." "Really? I'm just looking for my friend Johnny. He says he lives here." "Okay, listen," I'm armed, and I have the police on the phone. "You need to leave now." That was a partial lie. I didn't have the police on the phone, but I was willing to stab this guy. The dude gives a dejected sigh, turns and trudges back down the stairs. I'm shaking head to toe. I can't think straight. I can't believe I just had to reject my first burglar like that. I sheath the sword and run to the window that overlooks the parking lot point down below. I watch the dude meander into the parking lot. He stands under the tree across from my unit for a few minutes. It looks like he's fumbling with his phone. Then he's joined by another gentleman who approaches from somewhere out of my sight across the lot. They talk for a few minutes, then they get into a car in guest parking. It sits there for a few more minutes, then peels out of the lot, and just like that, he's gone. I never did call the police, and he never came back, and I was never 100% sure whether he was just severely inebriated or the world's dumbest burglar. I still have no idea where the liquid courage that convinced me to rush my enemies with a sword came from, save maybe the fact that I was worried he would hurt my cat point, and nobody hurts my faking cat point TLDR. Burglar tries to break down my front door, scared my cat, fight or flight kicked in, charged the door with a replica LOTR sword, politely told burglar to get lost, was 100% prepared to stab him. When we first got married we lived in upstate New York, 3k miles from my family point. My husband was military, so one night he had a 24-hour shift at the base an hour away. That's all fine and dandy. He leaves, I go about my day. Sometime after dinner I lock the house up: front door, garage door, mudroom door, and the back door. I go about my night and eventually call my mom, just to chat. Point literally the week before I installed a lock on the mudroom door. This is important point. So I'm chatting with my mom when I hear a knock on the front door. Go to look out the window in the kitchen and none is by the front door. Okay, weird. Continue to talk when I hear clear as day the front door screen open, the front door run latch open and the screen closes, the front door closes, and the mudroom door handle turns, stops when it's locked, and then there's a knock on that door. I was standing in the kitchen when all this went down, and it was as close to this area as you can get, including a window looking outside. I told my mom to hold on. I think my husband is home. I look outside and don't see his car, so I hang up with her and call him. He says nope, has still on post. I made up an excuse and hung up. Called my mom back and told her what happened. Proceeded for some stupid reason to go and open the mudroom door. No one is there. The front door is latched closed. The bottom handle is locked, but the deadbolt isn't. The garage is still locked. Checked both doors again. Closed the mudroom door and locked it again. A few minutes later my mom and I hang up, and I'm cleaning up from dinner and just putzing around when my back door starts trying to open. At this point I'm even more freaked out, but I don't know if this is one of those situations you call the cops for. Yes it is. So I called my dad, again 3k miles away. We talk while I check the house and look out the windows from upstairs. Nothing, so we hang up. I go about my night. Not 10 minutes after my dad and I hang up do I hear pounding on my back door, screaming, and then my neighbor knocking on my window telling me not to open my door. No matter what point, our complex was surrounded on all sides by forest and wood. On one side about 2 miles away was a minimum security state prison. A little further away was a state mental and homeless hospital. Both would have escaped, or newly released peeps just walking through the woods. They'd come up to our complex and try as many doors as they could to break in. Explained why all the houses in the area had good security systems. There was one other instance, but that was more idiotic. Husband left his keys in the car accidentally. Next morning the only thing missing was a spare change, and not the brand new iPad. We found the keys directly in front of the front door and his car's door wide open. So, I was just chilling at home one evening, and I was getting ready to go to bed. Before that, I wanted to watch just some more videos, so I was still sitting on the couch downstairs. Then, I pulled out my earbuds, and I could swear I could hear someone messing with the doors in the hallway upstairs. I knew it was irrational, and it was probably just the wind, but I was already panicking. I used my phone as a flashlight, and slowly stuck my head in the hallway, looking upstairs. Someone was lying there, a woman. She had this permanent scary look on her face, white skin, bad teeth, long greasy black hair. I couldn't see her very clearly, but she was laying there, head resting on her hands, looking towards me. I was officially freaking out and blinked, and she was gone, just completely vanished. I put on all the lights in the house and slowly went upstairs. Only on the second floor there weren't any lights on yet, so I went to the end of the hallway on the first floor to turn on the lights. Too scared to look upstairs there first, I just turned on the lights and backed away. I could swear I heard someone hissing from there. I tried to ignore it and went into my own room, now officially having a panic attack. I closed the door and took one quick glance out of the window. When I was about to close the curtains, there, in the backyard, I saw her again, waving creepily with the same expression on her face. Then she just disappeared. I never saw her again. I believe this was just my brain playing tricks on me, but it still freaks me out to this day. Long time ago, early teenage me watched American Werewolf in London on HBO at a friend's house. Biked home in the dark, a little freaked out. Got home to a completely empty house. All the sliders and windows were wide open. Little more freaked out because the family was supposed to be home. It was like 10 p.m. at this point. So I try to calm myself down, turn on a few lights and the TV. Cue a Ghoulish howl from what seems to be just outside the circle of light cast by the floods. Now majorly freaking out, I flee to my room and stand there, trying to convince myself that I imagined it. As soon as I venture back to the living room, the howl repeats. And again 3 or 4 times. Back in my room, slam the door and pile things in front of it. Too scared to even go around the house closing all the sliders and windows. My family returns about an lifetime hour later. They had gone to see a fireworks display a few miles down the road. The next morning we find out that Queenie, the neighbor's dog, had died in the night, and that was her howling. So relieved and so sad. I loved that dog. My mom was in the hospital 50 miles away. I was 19. We were pretty sure this was it. I was home alone. My parents' house is big. It's off the beaten path on a small lagoon. My dad had been staying up at the hospital that night. I went to bed about 1 a.m. I was playing on my laptop. My room was in a separate wing of the house. It can be sealed off with a single locking door. The door was shut but not locked. I have always been scared of the dark, so I had the lights in my wing on. So was the closet light. As I was messing around on GammaFax, I saw the lights in my wing turn off. All of them. The band of light under the door went black. I hopped up in bed and stared at it. My bedroom door was unlocked, and I was debating getting up to lock it when the shut door slammed. As in, it sounded like someone straight up kicked the bottom of the door with all their strength. I remember squeaking in shock. It took me about 6 seconds to be up on both feet with a blade about 4 paces back and just right of the door. I remember thinking, if the door opened, I could be on whoever it was almost instantly. I was also silently cursing that there was no light under the door anymore. No way to see the shadow of whoever was out there. Nothing happened. I was fighting off the fear of the situation and stupidly decided that going on offense was all that was left. I didn't have a phone in my room, and my Nokia was in another wing of the house charging. I threw the door open with my knife low in my left hand in a guarded position. There was no one there. I tossed the hallway light switch on. There was no one in my wing. There was no one in the house. The burglar alarm was still on. Confused, I turned on the main house lights and sealed the wing off with the locking door. I went back to my room and just sat there with my laptop open. My bedroom door now had a slight bow in it. A couple hours passed with me warily laying in bed. Around 3 AM, the lights under the door went dark. Now I was terrified. My knife seemed pretty insignificant and my previous dumb courage had ran out. I scooted my bed, no easy task, against my bedroom door, grateful the door opened inward. I retreated to my closet and waited for the sun to come up. When the skylight in my room got bright, my courage returned, and I moved the bed and exited my room. The wing door had been unlocked, which required a key. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs in the main house and realized my dad was home. I felt a little foolish as obviously he had been responsible for turning the lights off the second time. I lead my greeting with, "Oh, so it was you who turned all the lights off." He looked at me and said, "I got home about 10 minutes ago. I have zero clue what happened that night, but it never happened before, that night or after. My parents built the house and nothing untoward had ever taken place there. My bedroom door at my parents' house still has a bow in it to this day. This was over 15 years ago. My mom is still alive, and for that, I'm extremely grateful." At the time I lived alone with the exception of a dog, and I was nearly plastered drunk and fell headfirst down the stairs and knocked myself out. It was dark when I remembered heading downstairs and woke to the dog licking my face the next morning. It was kinda terrifying waking up like that and remembering the events from the day before. If I had seriously injured myself, no one would have been there to help and no one came by to visit, so I could have been dead before I was found. The only other thing that terrified me while being home alone was having the flu for 5 days. I have never in my life been so sick and drained of energy that I couldn't even get out of my bed. I mean, I was so weak at one point I cried because I thought I was going to die. I finally snapped out of it and mustered enough strength to roll out of bed, crawl and make my way downstairs to find something to eat to get my strength back. Sometimes living alone sucks, but I don't think I'd trade it for anything else right now, as long as I'm not sick, drunk or broke. I think I had a paranormal experience last week. I say I think, because it might just be me freaking out, but I can't find any logical explanation. For context, I live in a really small apartment on the ground floor, with no attics/basements. I was sleeping, while all my roommates were in evening classes. I wake up to go to the bathroom, and I notice a shadow, but make nothing of it. I just thought it was one of my roommates that came back early from class. As I approached my bedroom door to go towards the bathroom, the door closed and locked from the opposite side of where I was, so someone locked me inside my bedroom. My first thought was that it was my roommate pranking me, but then I noticed that they just went live on Instagram, so I thought it was an intruder. I pick up my phone, a coat hanger for protection and my keys that luckily I always put in my bag, so it's in my bedroom. Since my windows face the front lawn of our apartment complex, I go out and then enter the apartment through the main door. When I entered, I notice that every single window, even the one I crawled out of, was closed. I checked every single corner of the house and no one was there. So someone has to be either still hiding, or there was someone who managed to enter my home and go out and lock the windows from the inside. Needless to say, it freaked me out. I wasn't home alone, but was alone upstairs. I was about 14 at the time. It was around 10 p.m. and I was sitting on the couch watching TV. The couch was against a big window with long vertical blinds which can be seen if you're up close and look through at a slight angle. I heard a knock on the window behind me. We had flower beds beside the front door, so they would have had to step into them to reach the window. I was, and still am, an easily scared kid. I was paralyzed in fear and slowly slid down to the floor and out of sight of the window. I stayed there for a minute until I heard another knock. I found the courage to run down the stairs where my mother was doing laundry and told her what I heard. At first she didn't believe me, but came upstairs anyway and looked out my brother's bedroom window where she was able to see the front door and whoever was out there. The window was a little higher than the living room window, and as she looked down there was a man standing below my brother's window looking up at her. It scared the hell out of her, which terrified my brother and I even more. My mother is a brave woman and went to the door to see who it was. Turns out it was the ex-husband of a friend who somehow knew where we lived and ended up passing by the house and stopped to say hi. We weren't close with him nor his ex-wife, and he was known for being an angry and unpredictable man, so it was strange and made me feel super uncomfortable, especially the fact he didn't just come to the door. This actually happened last night. My parents' house is on a dead end, poorly lit street. I was house sitting with my brothers while my parents were abroad in Europe. My brothers left to get my parents from the airport at around 9 p.m. and at around 9:15 I heard the front handle jiggle and the dogs went crazy. I yelled that it was locked, assuming one of them had forgotten something important. Then I heard the screen door slam shut and I didn't see anyone or any cars outside when I looked out front. That's when I noticed our side of the house motion detector lights had turned on. I grabbed one of the guns stored at the house and a flashlight, and I searched the yard to find that somebody had opened the gate to the backyard. We keep it firmly latched at all times because of the dogs. Never really been happier for, or had a former belief in the Second Amendment, being all alone at home on a dead-end street with shoddy cell reception. Late to the party, but the first time I babysat myself, I think I was about 10 going on 11. My parents went out to dinner, and my two teenage brothers were never home. I sat calmly in the living room pretending to read, but was really feeling so alone and vulnerable. My heart started racing as I thought what I'd do if someone broke in, where I'd run to, etc. I clearly made a mistake and was not ready. I stood up and walked down the dark hall toward my bedroom. I had to walk halfway down to get to the first light switch and had that brief feeling of sweet relief when the light flooded the hall. I proceeded to my bedroom and reached for that light when my oldest brother popped around the corner and said, "Why, hello." I was so fucking stunned, my legs gave out and I collapsed so suddenly that I knocked the wind out of myself. I was trying to drag air back into my lungs and remember thinking, they've finally done it, they've killed me. I was 22, renting a few rooms in an old house, built in 1912, that had no air conditioning. This was in Texas in the summer. My bed was on the sleeping porch because, summer. I had all the windows open with box fans in them for air circulation. At the time, I slept in the nude. My boyfriend had lived with me before we broke up. I'm deeply asleep when the exterior door busts open and a man about my age is standing there. He's so drunk that he has to hold onto the door to stay upright. At the sound of the door opening, I leapt out of bed, but naked. It takes a minute to realize why he's staring at me like he is. Once I snap to the fact that I'm standing naked in front of this intruder, I grab a robe, cover myself, and shout, "What are you doing, drunk guy? Is X's name here?" Still wobbling and leering at me, hanging onto my door. Me, no, get out. I'm naked, drunk guy, aha. Still leering, looks like he's trying to decide if he can take me down. Me, I said, get out. I pick up a stick I kept by my bed and hold it like a baseball bat. Drunk guy shakes his head no, turns around and leaves. I try to lock the door, but he's broken it, so I block it with something to keep it closed. I was too shaken to go back to bed, so I got dressed and informed the guy who was the leaseholder that I was going to need a new lock for that door. I talked to my ex later and apparently he had been drinking after work with some coworkers at the bar across the street, being maudlin about how he missed me and what I was like in bed, and this guy got it into his head to try to see for himself. I'm eternally grateful that he decided I would probably put up too much of a fight. It was late at night and my parents had gone to a baseball game or something. I have this one robotic T-Rex toy from when I was like 8 that I had placed outside because I had no room for it inside. I live in Southern California and it was summer, so I had no reason to worry about it getting rained on. Keep in mind I haven't turned it on in years and the batteries are dead or close to it point. So I was eating a bagel with a blanket over my head and basically just walking around the house at random. I glanced outside through the sliding glass door and saw the toy. It was just sitting there, being a toy. I went to the kitchen to get some water and came back. While getting the water, I heard some weird moaning and roaring noises coming from the toy. When I came back, it had moved at least a foot and its eyes moved for a couple seconds before turning off again. The eyes on the toy moved when it was functioning, so that was definitely possible. I'm getting chills just typing it. I was in a house in South Seattle 2 years ago. The homeowner began renting out the house after he finished some renovations. He had some not so safe contractors work on the house. The homeowner didn't sell the pitch to me so well over beers the first month of living there. The contractor ended up losing his mind on drugs, stole a truck, called the homeowner at 3 a.m. asking for $200 and to bail him out of jail halfway through the electrical work. The only issue was he didn't finish the job and left his tools there. Well, 6 months later, I'm chilling on the couch working from home and I hear this guy banging on the door with all his might. This guy is going apeshit, screaming his lungs out to get in and get his tools back. Mind you, the tools were like a screwdriver, pliers, and a drill bit set. I grabbed my pistol and yelled out that the homeowner doesn't live there anymore. The contractor begins yelling that he is going to kick in the front door. I retorted with, "If you kick in that door, I'm going to unload this clip at you." Washington State has a castle doctrine law, so yeah. He noped the fuck out pretty fast after I said that point. I'm not one to pull on someone, but this guy was threatening my life. This was the only time I ever considered leaving my house despite the fact I had no car. I was putting on makeup to go to an event later that day and heard something fall. I thought nothing of it since I have dogs who are clumsy. A minute later, I hear footsteps approaching the room I was in. I stopped everything I was doing and just listened. I heard nothing for a few seconds, but decided to go check it out anyway. The house has been broken into before. As I exit my room, I see my dogs are laying in the hallway together, and they look scared. They won't come with me, so I just brave it myself and go into the living room where the sound was coming from. I see nothing and just sigh. A few seconds later I hear the footsteps from earlier rapidly approaching me from the dining room. As they were getting closer, stuff was falling off the tables and chairs. I froze and just said no. It stopped and I didn't hear footsteps for the rest of the day. A few days later, my sister came to me shaking because something kept running up to the side of her bed. I decided to sleep in her bed with her so she wouldn't be scared. No joke. 5 minutes in I hear heavy footsteps running up to the side. The fan that was blowing on us was being blocked by whatever was standing there. My sister slept with her Bible for a few weeks after that, lol. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, my brother, 11 or 12, and my sister, 15 or 16, and I were home alone while my parents went Christmas shopping. All of a sudden, we hear a big thump on the sliding glass door. We look out and see that the outer pane is fully spiderwebbed with cracks and a large hole in the middle. The inner pane was still solid. We called the police because we thought someone was shooting at us. They come out and dig the bullet out of the window and figure out it's a ball bearing, likely fired from a wrist rocket. Turns out our juvenile delinquent neighbor and his sociopathic friend decided they wanted to shoot stuff. In the dark evening, during a heavy snowfall they told the police, "We saw something moving in the woods and were scared, so we shot at it. Our dogs live out there, use hats. Also, the door is on the second story and there's a deck in the way. Also, my sister was sitting at the table basically right in front of the door. If it had gone through both panes of glass." For the whole week, before I was home alone, I'd been searching for my key to my front door. Couldn't find it anywhere, so thought I must have just lost it. Then one night, while talking to my mom, I realized I might have left my key in the front door, because when I came home after losing my key, I'd let myself in. I was so panicked and stressed out. My neighborhood isn't exactly safe. We got a locksmith in straight away and changed the lock. Even though I wasn't 100% sure I'd left my key in the door, it's better to be safe than sorry, right? So a few nights later, my mom was working late and I was home alone. I was in bed and knew she'd be home soon, and as I was dozing off I heard a key in the door. The key was giggling about for ages and I froze. Instinct told me it wasn't my mom. I creeped into the front room and looked out the window, and there he was, a man at my door with a key trying to get in. I was frozen with fear. I knew the key wouldn't work because I'd had the locks changed, but the thought that if I hadn't, what could have happened terrified me. After a few minutes he must have realized the locks had been changed and left. I obviously left my key in the door and he seen it and took. He must have been watching the house waiting for a dark night when there was no car in the garden and all the lights were off, so it looked like no one was home. I thank God every day that I just played it safe and changed the lock straight away when the doubt came into my mind. No doubt that was my worst night alone. Okay, so I was 10 and home alone for one of the first times. My instructions were to never open the door for anyone I didn't know. There was a peephole, so I could see if it was a neighbor or something. Well, I hear a car in the driveway, and I watch from an upstairs bedroom as a middle-aged man get out of his car and then rings our doorbell. He waits a little while, then rings again. Once, twice more. Then he sits in his car in our driveway, and I'm freaking out. But I'm young and stupid, and I don't want to call my parents, so they will continue to let me stay home alone. 5 minutes later the dude gets out and goes for the front door again. Now he's banging on the door like a madman and I hear him yelling, but I'm too scared to go downstairs because we have a giant window beside the door and he would definitely see me point. When he finally gives up and goes to his car again, he parks it in a driveway across the street facing my house and then just waits. Meanwhile, a 10-year-old me knows this is seriously creepy behavior and thinks he's definitely 100% coming to kidnap me. So I finally call my parents as he's getting out to ring our doorbell again. My parents call our neighbor who goes over to talk to him and see what's up and why he's obsessed with our house. Meanwhile, I'm in tears trying to hide in the closet with the phone, awaiting my imminent death. So my parents call me back, probably laughing at me, and tell me this guy is the son of our cleaning lady, Connie. He came to pick her up, but got her work addresses mixed up, and she was not at our house that day. As Connie was an older lady with a hearing issue, her son thought she had fallen in our house and either couldn't get up or couldn't get to a phone to call for help. So while I was upstairs freaking out, he was outside freaking out thinking his mom was hurt or dead. Not scary as an adult, but scary as a 10-year-old. I was about 13 and home alone with the dog. Great start. My sister had this helium balloon of a silly cartoon character. Being the young scientist, I pulled it down from her bedroom ceiling and attached cardboard ballast to the bag on the end of its string, carefully adding tiny scraps until it was neutrally buoyant. I watched it drift idly here and there in the room, following the tiny air currents that exist in a house that has drafts, sunbeams, etc. Anyway, about an hour later as I was watching TV in the living room, my heart jumped when I realized something was right next to me. It was the faking balloon, which had managed to make its way from my sister's room, through the hallway, into the living room, and end up right next to me. I'm getting the chills just thinking about how faking startling that was at the time. Heart pounding, I took the thing, put it back in my sister's room, and pulled the door closed. Later, I got up to go to the bathroom, stepped into the hall and my heart faking jumped again. The balloon was at the end of the hallway. My sister's door had been pushed open by our dog, who had gone into the room to nap on my sister's bed, and had left a gap just wide enough for the balloon to drift through. And it had made its way all the way down the hallway to the front door, the opposite direction to which it had gone before. When it made me jump in the living room as I watched, the balloon turned lazily, so that the cartoon character's face was facing me. I took off the ballast, returned the balloon to my sister's room, and didn't screw around with neutral buoyancy again. This happened like 2 weeks ago. My husband and I live in a townhouse with 3 floors to ourselves and neighbors on either side. It's not the greatest area, lots of drug deals going down, and I definitely am more aware of that at night. My husband had a late shift, so I was home alone with our dog at 2 AM. I'm doing my thing, scrolling through Reddit and half-heartedly watching Netflix in our basement, when a door on the second floor slams shut. Sometimes I hear the neighbors slamming doors and getting faked up, so I'll check in with my dog. If he doesn't respond, I know it's the neighbors and not in the house. But his head shot up as fast as possible and just stared at the stairs leading up. Needless to say, I was freaking the fuck out. I'm a petite woman, we had no weapons in the house, and I'm 99.9% sure there's someone hiding behind a closed door upstairs. So naturally, I find the only weapon-like object in our home, which happened to be a metal paper towel holder, and dial 911, and have it ready to go in my hand. I'm telling you, it took me a full 15 minutes to go up those 2 flights of stairs and clear every room leading up. I was shaking so bad. My dog wouldn't even come with me because he's a pansy. I got up to the second floor, and sure enough, the door at the top of the landing is closed. I was just up there a few hours before, and I know I left it open. I stood outside of that door, bracing myself for some ungodly being to murder me in my own house. Literally threw the door open like a wild woman and stood there, brandishing my paper towel holder in any direction, ready to fend off. And Intruder, my husband, had left the window open, and the wind had caused the door to slam. I wasn't home alone. My wife was sleeping. It was morning. My wife works nights, so she was laying down as I got up. I had a nasty email from a corporate about shipping back equipment within 30 days. Sure enough, I have a stack of stuff I haven't sent back yet. So I print shipping labels, then begin my process. It's always the same. Cut the shipping label in half, stick half in the box with the serial number, and tape the other on the outside of the box. I'm on my 6th or 7th box by now. I cut the label, set the scissors down next to me on the arm of the couch, stuff one half of the label in the box, then go to tape the other on the outside. The scissors are gone. I swear I put them right on the arm of the couch. It's fairly repetitive. I look everywhere. Lift up the cushions, look in the box. Nothing. I just cut the damn label. I hadn't moved. It made 0 sense. So I walk to the kitchen scratching my head. Reach up and grab my kitchen scissors. I turn around, walk back into the living room, and I shit you not, the scissors I had are sitting right on the arm of the couch, where I thought I put them originally. Now I know there was a glitch in the matrix. So I started googling this, and apparently it's a phenomenon. So I try to think scientifically. How can I prove to myself this happened? I go get a compass from my room. I have 2 pairs of scissors that are identical, which seems like a fairly simple test. I hold the compass out and level it off. Slowly lower it until it's 2 inches over the kitchen scissors. It throws the compass off by maybe 5 degrees. Seems about right. I grab the scissors that disappeared and repeat the same test. It throws the compass off by 180 degrees. Whatever happened, caused a magnetic distortion / magnetized the scissors. It lasted for maybe all of 15 minutes until it was back to normal. So I proved to myself that I wasn't losing it. However, I wasn't comforted by my assessment. Was cooking dinner one night several months ago when our Shiva sat in front of the door and started growling and doing his low bark that he does when he tries to act menacing. I looked out the kitchen window and didn't see anyone and went into the living room to peek out there but still didn't see anything. As I turned to go back to the kitchen, The door knob started jiggling and trying to twist. I just sort of quietly locked the deadbolt and ran to the back to get my fiance, who hadn't heard a thing. He'd been watching YouTube videos with his headphones on. He grabs a hammer and starts yelling at the guy through the front door to leave, but whoever it was just started banging even harder and saying incoherent things. We called 911 and held the door shut as the guy kept trying to open it and pry open the windows. We watched him pace across the porch and went to our vehicle and started messing with the doors and banging the windshield before finally face planting in the yard and knocking himself out. When the police arrived, they talked with my fiance for a bit, and it seems the guy was super drunk and thought he was trying to get into his own house as he apparently lived at the apartment complex across the street. After making sure nothing was broken, we told the officers we didn't want to press charges or anything. We've gotten more lights and are now working on setting up a smart security system to monitor the house. Because now we are always on edge anytime the dog barks at night. We've had another guy come up and start the whole cliche "my car broke down and I need a phone lem inside," and fiance still won't wear both ears on his headphones. But doggo has done a great job and he earned a lot of snacks and cuddles that night. He now sits proudly in the living room and keeps watch by the windows for any suspicious activity that might reward him with more food. I was maybe 15 years old and my family had gone to a concert. They were gone till about midnight, which, at the time, was pretty late for me. I was sitting at my desk with my headphones on listening to music and playing video games on my computer when my family got home. I never heard the garage door open or hear the car pull up in the driveway since my headphones were blasting music into my ears. My family apparently didn't have a way to get in the house. Still don't understand why none of them had a key, so my sister goes around the back and pounds on the large locked glass sliding door that I was right next to as hard as she could. I had never been more frightened in my life. I sincerely thought someone was trying to break into the house since the blinds were closed and I was too scared to open them. So, naturally, I grabbed a broom and swung the door open as fast as I could and started screaming while my sister was on the other side enjoying my agony and laughing her off. TLDR family went to a concert, couldn't get into the house late at night, made me shit my pants by sneaking into the house trying to get in. So this was pretty grand. I was nearly home alone. My family and I lived in an apartment, so noises from the little kids below us were commonly heard. My wife had a 10k run that she had gone to, and I was getting our 2.5-year-old daughter dressed a little while after she left. The idea was to meet her at the finish line, so we were out the door a half hour behind her. As I was finishing getting her dressed, I asked if she slept alright. Daughter, nah how? The old lady sang to me, hun, mom's not old. Daughter, no points are behind you. I got chills and froze. At that second, the pitter patter of feet from the kids in the underneath apartment ran away from where I was kneeling. At that same second, as I turn my head, our act kicks on and the last thing I see is our cracked closet door shut. I sit and stare at the door, piecing the logic of what happened. Kids made the noise and the act shut the door. When I entertained the idea it could have been an adult sneaking across the room, every hair on my arm stood up. So I'm just sitting there staring at a closed door. The damn thing jostles. Looking back on this, I imagine it was someone leaving our apartment building and slamming their door. I just remember the feeling of stress move from the hair in my arms to my face and feeling all the hair on the front of my scalp. It wasn't until my daughter then said in there, as she pointed to the closet, I caved. I snatched her under my arm and hauled us outside. As I'm finishing getting her dressed in my car, I'm keeping an eye on our door. We leave, and for the next 3 hours it's all I can think about. Nothing ever came from it, but for a brief second I thought there was a crazy beach in my daughter's closet with a pickaxe just waiting to make her move. I was living in a rented flat for a bit. I was asleep one night and kept hearing some weird cracking sounds. I woke up and realized someone was throwing stones at my window. I looked out and there was some drunk dude yammering to himself looking on the floor. Then I saw him pick up a carefully selected pebble, almost stumbling over himself in the process, stand upright, take a moment to steady himself, and composed himself for the final act of throwing. He took aim, completely oblivious to my confused face in the window, and took a well-aimed throw. The pebble bounced off my window, followed by a drunken slur out loud which I think was an aim point. I opened the window and called out, "What the hell, man?" He looked at me and said, "Who the fuck are you? Where's Jasmine? Name changed." I said, "There is no Jasmine, I live here." He looked annoyed and said, "No you fake don't. I'm coming up." He disappeared into the front lobby and started on the entrance system. I suspected that my buzzer would start going off, but alas it didn't. He instead got through to a neighbor who had apparently let him in. I heard him stomp up the stairs while I put my trousers on. I have limited sympathy for drunk idiots, usually, but it seemed this lad was love-struck. Point again. I expected him to start knocking on my door, however instead he knocked on the neighbor's door, yelling, "Jasmine, open da fucking door, man." I opened my door and asked him again, "What the fuck?" My neighbor emerged after hearing my voice, sensing safety. Turned out the lad was actually after my door, said Jasmine had moved out as I had moved in. After making a drunk friend, I assured him that Jasmine did not live here. I wasn't his girlfriend and I absolutely lived alone. I managed to get a couple of glasses of water in him and sent him off into the night. Point. While it was flattering having someone throw pebbles at my window to get my attention, I have to say I'm glad for Jasmine that she had moved out. He was harmless enough, just the drink got the better of him. I had just gotten out of the army and gone to college, where my sister was going to school. I lived a block from the bars, whereas my sister lived across campus. I often left my door unlocked for her, so she could crash on my couch if she didn't want to risk a cross-campus drunk walk. Note, she never took me up on it. One night, I was awoken by the sound of someone in my apartment. I was a bit more high-strung then, and I slept with a giant hunting knife under my pillow. I grabbed it and saw the form of a guy, definitely not my sister, in my apartment. I flick on the lights as I yell, holding this giant knife as naked as the day I'm born. Fun fact, your most scared can easily be someone else's most scared. The guy seeing a raging Hulk carrying a 8-inch knife was enough to make him try to scream, but too afraid to get the sound out. He curled up in a ball and shriveled to the floor. I fortunately collected myself when I saw how afraid he was. I realized he was drunk, and I told him he was going to get himself killed walking in other people's apartments. I ushered him out, still naked, and locked the door. 15 seconds later, I hear the doorknob jiggling. Best I can reason is that my apartment was where he used to crash, and in his drunken stupor thought he entered the wrong one. It took me a good 4 hours to get over the adrenaline rush and get back to sleep. I had just moved into my first house. Only me and the dog. I, being a genius, decide to watch The Grudge. Just when it gets really creepy, the power goes out. Slept on the sofa with the dog. Couldn't bring myself to walk past the attic hatch to get to my room. I slept early as there was nothing to entertain me, and there's a massive hammering on the back door. Turned out to be my cousin coming to check I was okay. But being a dickhead, he decided to just keep hammering and shouting to be let in, rather than saying who he was. 2 days later, power cut number 2. I was in the shower and had no towel or dressing gown. I get downstairs, wet and naked, light a few candles, go to take one upstairs so I can get dressed, and there's a face pressed against the frosted window in the back door. Handle jiggles. I crap myself and scream. My boyfriend shouted sorry he was early and to please let him in. Made him wait until I was dressed. A random car stopped in front of our house with 2 women in it. The lady in the passenger seat popped out and came to our front door and left. She didn't ring the bell or anything. I'm sure they didn't actually see me inside. After they left, I went outside and they left a present. In my teenage brain, I was like, that's weird, and then went back inside to continue my homework. About 30 minutes after my parents got home, I remember these ladies in the present on the porch. I told them what happened. They were appalled that I didn't say something sooner. We decided to see what's in the bag. Mind you, it was nowhere near Halloween. It was springtime. There was a doll-sized coffin in the bag, and in the coffin was a homemade Voodoo doll with pins sticking in it. We are all weirded out by the entire thing. Nervous laughter and all. So we decided to call the non-emergency police number and left that sheet on the porch. The police officer came by, and I told him what happened, and he agreed it was weird and creepy, and took the bag of goodies away with him. The first time I ever stayed home alone, it was dark outside and storming hard. My parents had gone out to dinner, and about 20 minutes after they left I heard a very loud no on the front door, and I went to the window to see who it was, and all I could see was a tall person in black hoodie, but I couldn't see their face. They were standing on my doorstep, and I didn't know what to do, so I grabbed the phone and tried to call my parents' cell phone, but they didn't pick up. Then I heard a knock again, but this time it sounded like whoever was outside was rattling the door handle. And then I ran to the back of the house, locked myself in the bathroom, and called 911. I was crying and shaking, and next thing I knew, literally 5 police cars were in front of my house. Whoever had been trying to get inside was no longer there, but the police questioned me, and while they were there my parents pulled up, and I had to explain everything to them. She was really freaked out, and the police started leaving, and told us to call right back if we saw anything suspicious or the person returned. About an hour after the police left, my neighbor comes over and knocks on the door. My mom answered, and the neighbor explained he had gotten home later in the day, and he was trying to pay my mom back for gas money she had lent him. He told her that he'd knocked on the door earlier but no one answered. It turned out the intruder was literally just my neighbor. I was so embarrassed because my mom told him that I thought he was trying to break in and called the police. But yeah, that was long, but it was horrifying until the very end. Not home alone, but the whole family was there, and I can't decide if that makes it better or worse. But I had a terrible day and was hiding in my room. My family was watching a movie. About halfway through, I hear some steps over the crunchy leaves outside my window. I look out, thinking it might be my neighbor, but I can't tell. He walks back to the crabapple tree and hides there for the duration of the movie. As soon as it ends, he quickly walks up to my sister's window with a short ladder, sets it up, and ducks down. I've been watching him for an hour at this point, so when he does that, I grab the gun I sleep with. I watched him peek into the window, and I could see he was dressed in all black with a ski mask on, so I couldn't tell who he was. Seeing that almost made me call the police, but for some reason I decided not to, maybe just so I had the chance to shoot someone. I don't know. I slipped quietly off my bed and went to tell my sister before she went into her room. She reacted a lot more calmly than I expected. I reached into her room, turned off the light, and ran back to mine to look again. He had grabbed the ladder and started running away, so I chased him down the street, where he had parked behind a strip mall's dumpster. He was gone before I could get the license plate number, and I never saw him or his car again. TLDR, a guy in a ski mask peeked into my sister's window, but ran away before I could catch him. I was home alone one Saturday afternoon. My parents were at some family event, and I was watching TV when I heard some strange noises. I get up and look out the window and see 2 men walking on top of the outer wall, which is about 6 inches wide and maybe 8 feet tall, so it's quite easy to climb and walk on. As soon as I saw this, I felt my heart fall to the floor, so I ran to my parents' bedroom, locked the door, and called the cops. The emergency services said it would take about 5 minutes for the police to arrive, and that I should stay inside the room and try to grab something to defend myself with. The worst part came when, right after I hung up the phone, the doorbell rang. You could answer through the phone because we had an intercom system, so when I answered, the conversation went something like this: "Man, this is the police. We received your call. We caught the robbers. It's safe to come outside me. How did you get here so fast? I literally just hung up the phone less than a minute ago, and the lady said it would take about 5 minutes for them to get here. Can you please turn the police siren on so I know it's you for sure?" I didn't get a reply, so I just hung up and became even more terrified that they knew I was inside the house and were trying to lure me out. I remember shaking uncontrollably, and after a few minutes the doorbell rang again. I answered, and this time it really was the police. Asked them to do the siren thing, and when they did I felt so relieved. They said they caught 2 of them, but were not sure if anyone else was inside already, since they couldn't come inside, so I had to come out myself. Jesus Christ, this is the most fear I have ever felt. It took me about 5 minutes to gather the courage to open the door and run outside. I swear I almost flew from my parents' room to the street. The neighbors were outside by then, and the lady from across the street had managed to contact my parents and let them know what had happened. In the end they only caught 2 out of 3, since the third one fled in a car when he saw the police arriving. Apparently they had been robbing the area, and I was incredibly lucky to have been alerted by the noise. God only knows what would have happened to the 20-year-old me, a girl, if they had been successful. When I was a kid I was home alone one night. Must have been around 10 or so. That night they were showing The Exorcist on TV, and my mom had forbidden me to watch it. But hey, she wasn't home. I watched it, mostly from behind a pillow and spent an awful lot of time talking to our GSD. As the movie ended the fuse blew, and everything went dark. My mom's electrical system has always been a bit touchy, and the fuses blew regularly, along with her TVs, that rarely live past 2 years. I spent what seemed like hours sitting on the couch, too scared to go flip the fuse back on. Meanwhile our GSD was trying very hard to protect me from the danger. She could sense I was scared, but not what I was scared of. In the end I managed to walk with the GSD very near me, to the fuse box, flip the switch, turn on every damned light, and run to bed. That GSD helped me through so many things, and after it died I almost believed in an afterlife. We called her name at the dinner table some years after she passed, as a joke, because we had some leftovers, and immediately after we called her name, our cat turned its head towards the door and growled. It walked very slowly away from the door, while keeping constant watch on it. I'm sure this will get buried, but here goes. When I was in high school, my parents and brother were away at a hockey tournament and my boyfriend was working, so I was waiting for him to finish work to go over and hang out with him. Our computer was in the kitchen, which was next to our basement stairs. My dog was happily snoring away on the floor next to me, while I chatted with my friends on MSN. All of a sudden, my dog jumped up startled and started growling at the basement stairs. Figured she had a nightmare, so I went to comfort her when all of a sudden I heard a giant smash in the basement. Sounded like someone had thrown a pile of dishes on the cement ground. And then footsteps running up the stairs. I've never booked it out my front door so quickly. I ran the 6 blocks to my boyfriend's place. His mom was home, and called him at work. Asked him to go to my house, turn off our TV/internet, and make sure our dog was okay. Yes. I'm awful. I left my poor pooch there. I was 16. Give me a break please. He went to my place. The dog was totally fine and nothing was broken downstairs. We had lots of spooky issues with that house, but that was the first experience with it. It was late at night, like around 3 AM, and the rest of my family was long asleep. I was awake and restless, and decided to go outside for some fresh air, before attempting to fall asleep again. I was out on the porch for a few minutes, before I heard rustling at the door immediately behind me. The front door has Venetian blinds, and I could clearly see a dark shadow in a gap in the blinds that served as the usual spot from which we'd peek, except because I hadn't turned any of the lights on I couldn't see who it was. I was staring back at them wondering which one of my family it was, until I realized that they were staring at me for a little too long and a little too motionlessly to be normal. I expected I'd see a little wave, or someone would crack the door open and ask what I was doing outside, but nothing. Then whoever it was ducked out of view, and it was quiet. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear bedroom doors. I was frozen on the step, racking my brain for any logical explanation and kind of freaking out. I decided to go back inside, and everything was how I left it. No lights on, no bedroom doors open, silent. Truly freaking out now, because what the hell could that have been? There was no hint that anyone had been awakened out here. Until my faking cat startled the shit out of me with a meow. That little faker had a habit of standing up on the side table next to the door and balancing his front paws on the doorknob so he could look outside. I had completely forgotten. He almost gave me a heart attack out there. Maybe not the scariest thing ever, but it was a tense few minutes for me. When I was in high school my parents went to a holiday party and I stayed home. After they'd been gone a few hours, I heard my dad come home by himself and go upstairs to bed. This wasn't unusual, he usually got tired of parties and my mom stayed on later. I very specifically heard the front door open, it had Christmas bells on it, so you couldn't miss it, heard his heavy as boots go up the steps, and heard the bedroom door close. I yelled out "Night, Dad" to him as he walked up the steps, but he didn't respond, which I found weird, but not super weird, because he is hard of hearing. About an hour later I decided to call my mom and ask how she was getting home, if she needed a ride, etc. cause Dad had left. She said, "What do you mean? Dad is here with me." I swear my throat dropped to my ankles. I told her, "No, I heard him come home," but she just laughed and put my dad on the phone to talk to me. I told him he needed to come home ASAP because there was someone in the house. So my skinny as runs outside in the snow, waited in the street for my parents, called the police, only to find nobody in the house. Nobody. My parents thought I was going crazy until my mother realized that it was the anniversary of my granddad's death. She thought it was hilarious, and I continue to never be alone on December 21st anymore. Not funny at all, Granddad. When I was 15 my dad moved into a new house. It was actually a very old house, built in the 20s. It had some history serving as a roadhouse back in the day. In Sacramento it was an anomaly, built with a basement, and it faced Fair Oaks Boulevard, a very busy street, so the practical entrance was the laundry room at the back of the house past the kitchen. There was a saloon door between the living room and kitchen with creaky hinges that made a very distinct noise each time someone pushed through. The noise echoed off of the plaster walls and dark hardwood floors. Our first night there everyone had plans and was out except me. I sat in the living room on the couch watching TV with my back to the kitchen door. After a couple hours I heard the creak of the saloon door. I expected someone to walk past me to have a seat or to get to one of the bedrooms. Only, nobody walked past. After a minute I looked back to see who it was, and there was nobody there. And the saloon door was removed and leaned against the wall. Turns out the creaking bothered my dad, so he took it down earlier in the day. Husband got a huge promotion and moved 1,500 miles away. I stayed behind to sell our current house while our new one was being built. This lasted several months and I hated the nights alone. I was obsessive about using the alarm system at all times. One night I was up late listening to a podcast about the original Night Stalker, who we now know was Joseph James D'Angelo. The hosts were talking about a potential eyewitness. This kid heard a noise on the roof, then saw a man lean forward and peer into his window from the roof, just hanging like a bat. The visual really got to me. I couldn't sleep, so I went to the kitchen to get a spoon of peanut butter. From this vantage point, I could see every external door in the house. Suddenly the home security alarm went off. I looked in the direction of each of the doors. Nothing. I ran to the panel and my stomach felt like it dropped 10 feet. The window. One of the window sensors had been tripped. Which window? I disarmed the panel and called my husband, trying not to sound terrified. Here I'm about to die. They'll never get my blood out of the carpet. No one will buy this house. And then my husband laughed at me. Turns out one of the window sensors is super sensitive to wind. PS. My husband happened to turn on some TV show about D'Angelo while I was typing this. Nope. Man, it's been years since I have thought of this story. Well, you need a little backstory. I have a rich grandfather who lives in Morocco and owns a farm. I was at one of his houses. The top part of the house wasn't constructed yet. Ramadan had just ended and everyone was out to get food, but I wasn't feeling hungry. I go up the stairs into a room with a part of the roof not built yet, and what do I see? A grown-ass man holding onto the wall with yellow teeth and whitish eyes, and he scurries up the wall unusually fast, putting his legs in positions his legs couldn't have moved in. It's not the holding onto the wall that scares me. This is Morocco. There are a lot of houses with holes in the walls. He could have held on easily. It's how fast he moved in unhuman ways and the look on his face. Now that I look back on it, his clothes might have had blood on it. Afterwards I ran downstairs, hid in the bathroom, and called my dad, who was also on vacation with me. This one time I was home alone, just kicking it on the bed, surfing Reddit. I decided to hit the kitchen to get a quick snack. So I left my phone charging on my bed, and man, when I came back, the fucking phone had moved right under the closet door, unplugged. I freaked the fuck out. The closet is all the way across the room from my bed. I stood there for a good minute, just neurons firing, trying to get an answer. It was not possible. So I hit the road and never looked back ever since. Joking, I did freak out and questioned reality for a bit. Then I realized there's a lot of things I don't know and simply just went and picked it up. I wasn't scared that there'd be something in the closet. I just admired that this shit is really taking place. I didn't overthink it because I knew I wasn't going to find an answer, so I just kept on surfing on my phone. I still think about it as a reminder that shit is phenomenal out here. I was home alone one night and had my best friend sleeping over, and another friend came over just to hang out. It got to be around midnight, so the other friend said it was time for her to go home, and my best friend insisted on walking her home, but I stayed home by myself because my parents told me I wasn't allowed to leave the house, and I was a goody two shoes at the time. Well, time was passing, and she still hadn't come back. I'll mention now that the other girl was no more than a 2 minimum walk from my house. Eventually, about an hour later, that friend texts me to make sure my best friend got back to my house alright, because she promised she'd tell her and wasn't answering her texts. I freaked out and was like, I thought she was at your house this whole time. And she was, like, she left an hour ago. I thought she was with you. So we are both freaking out now because she just disappeared. We both keep calling her on the phone, but there's no answer, and I'm scared to death because I was like 14 and home alone, and my best friend had gone missing. Eventually, about half an hour later, the other friend's mom finds her lying in the grass in the middle of the way to my house. She had fallen asleep there. I still don't even know how. Anyways, she walks to my house and she's laughing when I let her in at the absurdity of the situation. Meanwhile, I'm crying and hugging her and scolding her for laughing when we thought something horrible had happened to her. She sobered up real quick and apologized and looked really guilty, so we didn't talk about it again after that and went up to bed. When I was a teenager, my landlord decided he wanted us out so he could sell the house. Except he didn't want to follow the law. He wanted to force us out the day he brought it up to my parents. My parents saying no and that they had rights pissed him off. Over the next few days he became threatening and wanted to have all kinds of people traipse through our home. My parents had the locks changed. One night they were out and I'm home alone. I'm in the garage where we had our computers. The garage was right near the front door. Suddenly I hear the front door rattling. And then banging. Lots and lots of banging. And then male screaming and yelling. I was terrified. I was a 16-year-old girl. I actually grabbed my pants and I hid in the laundry room, which was in the garage. I was so scared that I called my parents instead of 911. Turns out the asshole had brought over a real estate agent and he was going to just waltz into our home unannounced. When the police came, they told him off and said he was never to do that. Unfortunately, wasn't the only time we had to call the cops on him because he became increasingly unhinged, and unfortunately he lived on the property in a guest house in the back. I was alone as a teen and doing what a teen does, learning for the next exam, master baiting. Edit, wasn't home alone and missed that until after I replied, but whatever, I'm not deleting it. About years ago my wife and were asleep. It was about 3 in the morning and we heard a thud. It was loud, close, and it woke us up. Thud. Another one. We sat up, confused. Thud. What was it? Thud. Someone was on the steps. Thud. Someone is coming up the stairs. Thud. They are in our house. Our bedroom door is at the top of the stairs facing 1-1 and my son's bedroom is across the hall. Thud. It wasn't my son. He couldn't walk. Thud. The dog was in our bedroom. Thud. I looked around for anything to grab. Thud. My wife and I froze in fear. Someone should be at our doorway any second. Thud. Thud. What? There's only 7 steps. Thud. Confused. We got up and I went into the hallway to face whatever was there. The hallway was empty. Thud. It was coming from the basement. Thud. I walked downstairs, grabbed something I could swing, and went into the basement. Thud. Thud. The basement was empty. Thud. I looked into the crawl space. My stupid but adorable cat had gotten into the heat ducts and was playing right around the spot that would have been under the steps I blocked off and made sure neither cat could get into the duct the next morning. My room is on the ground floor. It can get quite warm during the summer, so I like to leave a small window open to keep it a bit cool. Anyway, at around 3 AM I start hearing a noise which wakes me. As I wake up, the noise sounds like someone screaming periodically, and it seems to be getting closer and closer with each scream. So I'm lying in bed and hearing this screaming get louder until it is basically right outside my window. Little side note, the screams sound very much like a woman screaming out. So at this point the screams sound like they are right outside, and I figured I had to look to make sure nothing was wrong. So I got up and pulled back the curtain as a scream rang out. And lo and behold, there, sitting on the hood of my car in the driveway was a fox. She let out another human-like scream and then noticed me, gave me a look, and ran away. Never knew foxes had creepy human-like calls. Scared the shit out of me. For reference, I had just self-injected a medication at home in a rural area, 1 hour to the closest hospital, and I started to feel a rush through my stomach. Throat tightened, limbs started losing motor function, and everything was going black. The first response ambulance was stationed about 5 minutes away, but I was rostered on with one other person that day for callouts, and we had a minimum of 2 people in the ambulance before we could respond to calls. I rushed for the phone as quickly as I could and tried to make it to the front of my house so that they could locate me quickly. And tried dialing emergency, but my vision was really unfocused and I couldn't hit the buttons. I saw someone driving past my driveway with their windows down, and I screamed for help after falling on the concrete. They just stared at me and drove past. Assholes. I nearly blacked out. I think my blood pressure was dropping, but I fought really hard and managed to eventually get hold of the emergency, and they dispatched a team to me. It took about 20 minutes and I somehow didn't pass out during that time before the ambulance arrived. I was home alone in a little cabin in the woods. The curtains to the sliding glass door were closed. The small kitchen area had an opening when on the opposite wall with the tiny kitchen table under it. That window was open with a screen covering the opening. I was standing to the left of the open window at the sink doing dishes and listening to Fleetwood Mac's album Tusk. My 2 cats were on the floor by the sliding glass door. As I wash the dishes, I glance out at the beautiful woods surrounding the cabin. I'm singing and bopping to the music. The cats suddenly streak by me and jump onto the table and then to the windowsill and are trying to bust out the window screen. I grab them and go to the sliding door, scolding the cats. I put the on one arm and use the opposite hand to go behind the curtain to unlatch the door. I then use the arm holding the cats to pull away the curtain, and the cat flip out, scratching me. I look through the window and a fairly large bear is standing on her back feet pushing on the sliding glass door, whiffing. I scream. The cats are now out the window in the kitchen and the bear turned and waddled away. Yep, I biss myself a wee bit. I pulled the curtains all the way open, double checked the door was latched and finished the dishes and put the screen back in the window. Welcome to the woods. I live in NT, Australia, right up the top end. Suburb we live in has got patches of bushland in between some of the streets, so some houses back directly onto the bush, only they're chain link, cyclone approved fences to separate them from the bush. I live in one of said houses, and have been for 3 years. Not too much has happened, which is a surprise considering the mob of locals that live in the patch of bush that surrounds my street. There is one thing, however, that still creeps me out a little bit. The first night after we moved in, I was up doing modules for the workplace I had just had my orientation at. I had locked the back fly screen door with a key, but had left the glass sliding door open because the aircons in the house were letting out a funky smell, which is a whole other story. Whenever we switched them on, it was hot, 80% humidity, and I was used to the cooler weather of more southern states. It was just me and my younger brothers at home. My parents at a small party that was being held for them by a couple of friends. I had been told to stay up until they had gotten home because we didn't know the area or our neighbors, so they wanted me to be awake just in case anything happened. A good call on their behalf. It was around midnight when I heard the fly screen rattle. My WHS policy-filled mind ignored it, telling me that my dog would have barked and made me know if it was anything other than the wind or one of the green tree frogs that had decided to visit. I had heard my window rattle about an hour beforehand and had peeled through the blinds to spot the silhouette of one of the beauties crawling up the fly screen. It was after about 15 minutes of hearing the door rattle that I remembered that the dog was still in kenneling until the next day. I panicked just a bit, shutting down my laptop quickly and turning off the light in my room. Probably not the smartest idea. Being the good older sister I was, I checked my brother's rooms, closed their doors, and grabbed one of the unattached legs of a table we were yet to set up from the hall, and moved into the living area. Stealth-like and all that. The back door was completely open, lock busted, half off its tracks. The fridge door was open, the silhouette of a large man standing there. Knew it wasn't my dad. I was fairly certain that the last time I had looked, he hadn't sprouted an afro. It was lucky that at his exact moment, I saw headlights pull into the driveway, the light gleaming down the hallway from the front door. The intruder turned around, carton of beer in hands, and fled through the broken door. Me, being the beach ass bussy I am, ran to the front door, letting my parents in, and screaming at them to get the guy. Dad didn't want the dickhead to steal his VB, so of course took off running down the hall to catch him. Mum called the cops. They said they were on their way. To end the story, the dude was one of the few aboriginals who actually had the guts to break and enter. Most of them will just stand creepily at your back fence and leave it at that. In his drunken stupor, he had thrown the carton over the fence, breaking all the glass in the process, and had then not had the strength to pull himself over with it. Cops handcuffed him, dragged him out, and with weary voices apologized. Almost everyone up here has had sheets stolen from them at some point, and it's not unusual. Just scary in my mind, because we hadn't been there for that long, and had moved from one of the nicer areas in Sydney, to the shithole that my area in Darwin is. We have caught the same dude, despite being locked up for a bit, standing outside our fence, rattling it every now and then. The cops can't do anything, of course, not until he's actually on our property. Our dogs took a couple of lunges at him. He almost lost a finger once, but he's probably too drunk to feel it. Well, this story has two parts. The first half is your typical attempted break-in, while the second is a little more ridiculous. One evening I was hanging out at home with the windows open. It was summer. I heard something at the door, but thought little of it, because that door opens out directly onto a sidewalk, so it could be anything. Plus the door has an iron security grate with a deadbolt, so I was unmoved. Then I heard a noise at the side window. This was unusual, because the other windows of the house face a small gated parking lot next to the apartment. I heard steps outside the kitchen window next, and rushed to grab a pry bar kept by the bed for just such eventualities. I ran back to the kitchen, and without looking I stabbed between the blinds, and into the darkness. I hit something, but not hard. I heard a man's voice say "oh" sheet and heard someone running off into the dark. I ran outside to see who it was, but by the time I got out there, they were gone. Turns out one of the neighbors had left the gate to the parking area open. Well, a few days later, my husband and I were getting it on in the kitchen, and suddenly, the window slides open and a hand starts pushing the blinds aside, and a guy looks in, before going "oh sheet, sorry" and running off. I swear it was the same guy. After that we made sure the neighbors kept the gate closed. The layout of my bathroom is that whenever you enter, you can straight up see the toilet and the hangers to your left. The door opens the same way, and my room is located in such a position that even outside the bathroom I'm able to see the toilet and hanger if the door is open. I live in an apartment building. Anyways, I remember that one of our neighbors died. I was like 8 or 9. My parents were away down at the store, and they left me alone. I was okay with it, because I was watching Jetix all day long. But I needed to go to the toilet, so I quickly ran to one after the show ended. I found the toilet to be open, and I was seeing the silhouette resembling the man inside. I freaked out and quickly ran to my room, and hid behind the bed. I straight up thought it was the neighbor's damned soul. After my parents arrived, it turned out that my mother left a large sweatshirt and a towel on the hanger near the bathroom door. I refused to go to the toilet until she put them down and hid them. One night, after letting the dog out for his final pee of the night, I closed and locked the door, got 3 steps away, and heard knock knock. Nothing like this had ever happened before, but I needed to know what it was, so I went back and did some experimenting, opening and closing the door, and walking away several times. Nothing. I'm sure it was just a weird pressure thing, maybe pushing or pulling the door making the noise. So I go back to the couch, sit down, and hear knock knock. Never heard it again. The night before, when I laid in bed, I had heard a loud bang from somewhere inside the house, and it turns out some string lights hanging over a bed in another bedroom fell off the wall. I was sitting in the basement earlier that day and heard something slide behind me, like if someone slides a book or something across a table. Couldn't find a source for that one. I always hear dishes falling over in the sink, but it's empty, and various other small things. It can all be logically explained, but it only happens when I'm the only one home. My dog notices the sounds, and I have 2 working carbon monoxide detectors also. My dog will randomly, out of a deep sleep, jump up, go downstairs, and come back up with some random piece of wire or some other odd object. I never see where he gets the stuff. He's only gone for a second, like he made the trip specifically for the thing. I half jokingly say it's as if some ghost in our basement calls him down and gives it to him, because that's what it looks like, lol. This story happened a few years ago when I was 17. I had been left alone in my house pretty often, and I was always terrified of something happening. I was so usually scared of being home alone, to the point where I would ignore sounds and assume they were nothing. I was sitting in the living room watching TV when I heard the gate shake out back. We have a very rickety gate. I darted my eyes to the window and I did notice the motion sensor light come on, but that wasn't uncommon as I have cats that like to roam, so I assumed it was one of them leaving or going. I hear a bit of a thud and a jiggle when I look back to the window again and notice a figure at my door. When I bolted into the hallway and peeked around the corner, the guy was testing my door handle to see if it would open. Mind you, this was around 9 PM, so it was just about pitch black out. Guy wearing a black hoodie, and I can almost make out his face. I ran to my room, grabbed my bat, made sure to make myself known and shouted at the guy, showing my bat. The eeriest part is when I shouted, he kinda jumped, but then just stared at me for a good 5 seconds before walking away, and I heard him hop the gate again. I called my parents and then the police after that, and he was caught 2 weeks later trying to break into a house down the street. Just your average career burglar. I was about 16 and binge watching Criminal Minds. The way my parents' house is set up is that the window over the kitchen sink looks right out onto the walkway leading to our side door, which is the main door people come in and out of. I was mid-episode and got up to get a glass of water. My worst nightmare was looking up at night and seeing someone standing at the side door. I looked up and saw this old as balls man standing on the front step peering in at me. I screamed bloody murder and demanded to know what he wanted. It was 9 PM. There's no way he was selling me Girl Scout cookies. He asked me if my parents were home, and I stupidly said no, I was alone, then yelled at him to go away. Then I grabbed the house phone, no cell reception at my parents' house, and my dog, and locked myself in the bathroom. I called 911 and the police got there and looked around, but the guy was long gone. I got a long talking to about what not to say to people when they come to the door at night. I was in 4th grade or somewhere abouts. Nobody else home because they had all gone to work or school, and I had school in an hour that I would walk to. As I was walking between rooms, I saw out of the side of my vision somebody walk across the hall. I ran into my room, opened my window and jumped out, ran to school, and called my mom, who called a neighbor to check. No signs of any break-in. Everything closed up, but the window I opened to leave. Looking back, I'm fairly certain one of my brothers cut class, but it scared the shit out of me at the time. More recently, but still like 10 years ago, I wasn't alone but everybody else asleep or gone somewhere. Up late playing video games with all the lights off when suddenly my entire room lit up like daytime for a couple seconds. Being the high anxiety kid I was, I assumed it was nuclear war, but at the same time I was in disbelief. So I just kind of went over to my window, looked outside, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. My brother came home from the store 20 minutes later with the explanation. When he was leaving the store, he immediately had a bright spotlight cast on him, and he was kinda pissed that somebody was shining a spotlight on him. A few seconds later it was gone, but he could see the source. A meteor had lit up the entire sky. Armed police officers banged on my door in the middle of the night because of something I supposedly said online a few days earlier. I won't say what the comment was, but I will say, the other guy falsified evidence. The police could have easily discerned this, but they didn't bother. The police waited 3 days, so it obviously wasn't that urgent. They could have waited until morning point. There was no mention of a search warrant. The cop in charge bullied his way inside, refused to leave until I insisted, and behaved in a threatening manner the entire time. He gloated that I would pay a huge fine and spend 6 months in prison, which his good cop colleague immediately contradicted. Every time I hear a bump, day or night, I panic because I think it's the cops. I will never trust the police again. They can all burn in hell. I'd rather deal with the criminals. They at least can be deterred by threat of violence, and they otherwise mind their own business. Interesting question. This was a few years ago, and I was just chilling at home when suddenly I was overcome with this overwhelming feeling of impending doom. My heart started racing like it was going to beat itself out of my chest. My mouth went dry, and I started to feel numb in my places. I was absolutely sure that this is death, and I'm just about to go. I was in my apartment and there was no reason for anyone to show up looking for me for at least a few days. Although I had a good social circle, it has always been normal for me to go AWOL for a few days. I do not let anyone in my apartment and always meet outside, so nobody even knows my apartment number. My wife was out of town and she would definitely know something was up if she didn't hear from me for a day, but even that is too late. I got up and stepped outside my apartment to get some fresh air. I took my phone out to call 911, but before that I thought I should measure my heart rate. It was going 175. 175 is too high for me, since I had a very active lifestyle, and resting heart rate was nowhere close to that. The next thought was that I'm way too lucid and rational in my head to be having a heart attack. So I started to take deep breaths and put on some nice meditating music. I calmed down a bit and googled my symptoms to figure out I was having a panic attack. I still don't know why I would panic. My life was perfect in all possible ways. I was making 5 figures a month, had a great relationship with my wife, had a bunch of friends, had my own place. I was actually very happy. Apparently my body disagreed. When I had a roommate, we went to see the movie Annabelle when it first came out. The movie was over and we went home, but she and some of my other friends decided that they wanted to go out to a club. I didn't feel like partying, so I just stayed home. They all left, and then maybe an hour and a half later I'm in my room and I hear the door open and keys jingling, like she had set them on the counter, so I figured she had forgotten something and came back to get it. Next we went to see the movie Annabelle when it first came out. The movie was over and we went home, but she and some of my other friends decided that they wanted to go out to a club. I didn't feel like partying, so I just stayed home. They all left, and then maybe an hour and a half later I'm in my room and I hear the door open and keys jingling, like she had set them on the counter, so I figured she had forgotten something and came back to get it. Then about 2 hours later the picture hanging up in my bathroom fell off the wall, so that obviously scared me. The next day, when she finally woke up, I asked her what she forgot, and she looked at me confused, and she said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Didn't you come in last night and set your keys on the counter?" She said no. Then I told her what happened, and she thought I was just trying to scare her, but once I told her that I was serious, she freaked out herself. That's my story. May not be too scary to some, but that's one for the books for sure. I was home alone sometime in elementary school while my parents were down the street at a neighbor's party. My room is on the 2nd story and has a small decorative balcony that looks over the front door. I often left the balcony door open because my cat would come into my room that way from the roof point anyway. I'm sitting on the floor of my room playing out loud with Pokemon figures. 2 men came to the front door and knocked. I got quiet. I guess they had already heard me though, because after a moment, one of them called up, "Come on down, little girl. We know you're up there. We are not going to hurt you, right?" Random name I forget. The other guy responds, "No, of course, we are not going to hurt you." I stayed completely frozen until I heard them walk away laughing. I looked out just in time to see their silhouette disappear out the courtyard. I picked up the phone and almost called the police, but they called my parents instead. They came straight home, and my dad walked the neighborhood looking for those guys, but we never found out who they were. They were probably just asshole salesmen or something, but it still creeps me out to this day. My grandma has this big old house, 3 floors. The bottom ones have this new furniture and sheet, but the highest one is in the state, like it was in the 70s, 80s except for one room. I was at the highest floor to get some books my grandma stored there, and as I was leaving the door, I for some reason stood there and looked into a shadow 3 meters in front of me. Something was wrong. It was at the end of corridor, where some old boxes and ancient stuff was lying around, and the box made a shadow. It was sunny day outside. From the light from the bathroom window, nobody used that bathroom, so the door stays open. In fact, no one really goes there, because except for me, because nothing to do there than just get some books. It wasn't a real dark shadow, more of a grey one, that you can see through partly. Don't how it's called in English. There was this line, completely dark, around 35 centimeters long, 3 centimeters thick and a little curved, maybe 50 to 60 degrees, pointing from floor to ceiling. After like 3 seconds it fastly, but slow enough to notice where, got behind the box. The box was like 30 cms next to it, and it moved away like when you move something in Microsoft Paint. I stood there for 10 seconds, thinking what it might be. What if it is a ghost or some monster? You don't really care if monsters are real or not in these situations. And what if someone or something just starts rushing against me? I ended up walking down the stairs looking pretty chilling, but in fact I was thinking at maximum, having a plan in my mind for every possible and impossible scenario. As I got downstairs, my grandma was in the kitchen already. I told her what I've seen, and she did not act like probably a hallucination how she mostly reacts to those. I'm sure of what I've seen. The whole place looks like some place from a 70s 90s horror movie. My aunt's dolls all over the place. Plus THAT toy thing when babies are in, when they can't walk, don't know the name in English, parked in the middle of the room. Happened last week. I live in a good neighborhood. I was not asleep yet, but I heard a sound like someone was knocking on the window of my place. When you look out my bedroom window you can see the door to the backyard. I looked out and saw a person dressed in all black, including hoodie over face. Didn't know if male or female. I looked away thinking maybe I was seeing things. So I turned away and looked again. Still there. Turned away again. Still there. I jumped out of my bed and yelled, calling the cops now, and ran out of my room. I was in just underwear. Ran into my bathroom and locked the door. A cop was actually in the area. When the cop came he didn't see anyone. I'm thinking it's someone that lives near me. When the cop left and stated I was safe I said fuck it and went back to bed. But I looked outside again just to verify if my brain was playing tricks on me, but it wasn't. I looked outside and it wasn't lighting or anything. Someone was outside and it faking sucks. When I was like 16 I was home alone watching TV. There was a side door off the living room that led outside. I suddenly heard 2 men talking outside the door. There was a long walkway with a ramp and fence to get to the door, so you can't be there accidentally. They were talking about some friend of theirs who was arrested, so they seemed like scrupulous characters. I quickly walked out of the living room into the kitchen trying to decide what to do. The house is on a hill, and there's a balcony off the back of the kitchen with no stairs up or down. The only access point is through the interior of the house. A third man had a ladder and was climbing onto the balcony when I walked into the kitchen. He didn't see me yet cause he was concentrating on climbing, so I grabbed a knife out of the woodblock and hid in the back of my mum's closet for what felt like forever. Finally crept out and all the men were still outside. Turns out my mom failed to tell me she had hired house painters. will get buried, but I just remembered mine. I was about 13 to 15, somewhere in there. I put up an ad on Craigslist advertising my babysitting services. I had my own cell phone at the time and put up the number, and hey, to add a personal touch and let people know I wasn't a creeper, added a photo of myself to the posting. Yes, I know, but my mother was unaware, and even if she had been, she wasn't really tech savvy enough to know I had put myself in the danger zone. So my cell rang, and it's a dude interested in hiring me. Great. He explains it's a little bit of an unusual situation. He says his wife and himself tend to throw parties that the kids who are apparently somewhat close to my age aren't welcome at, so I would be on site keeping them company, more or less. I still remember his voice and exactly what he said. It's a little bit of an unusual party, and let me tell you why. He kept building it up more and more each clause, until it became clear that these were basically eyes wide shut parties. I expressed that I'd thought about it and was about to hang up when he said, "Oh, I have one more question." "Yes? Can I print out your photo and come all over your pretty face?" I clapped my Motorola shut so fast. My brain decided it was funny at the time, and I told my mom when she came home. She was not nearly as amused, to put it lightly, which cemented the background sickened feeling I'd been trying to ignore. What a piece of garbage. Edit. Actually, I think it was an LG Shine at the time, and I slid it closed aggressively, but, you know, same sentiment. My husband and I had recently moved into an old farmhouse with our 3 young kids. Since the house was on a highway, but pretty far from town, we would occasionally have people stop with car trouble and needed to use the phone or get directions to a gas station. This was the mid-90s, so cell phones weren't very common yet. Anyway, one night I woke up to hear a loud and urgent pounding on our front door. Initially I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep. Whoever was at the door kept pounding urgently, so I got out of bed to go check, thinking someone needed car help again. By the time I got to the door, the porch was empty and no one was out there, so I went back to bed. The next day we woke up, and our entire front porch was covered in blood. We immediately called the police and they came out to investigate. Turns out someone on a snowmobile had been driving through and got cloths lined on our barbed wire fence and sustained some pretty deep cuts. They came to our house looking for help, and after no one answered for a while, they walked to the next house. The person was able to go to the hospital and didn't have any lasting damage, but the whole experience really terrified me. When I was in graduate school, my roommate and I had an apartment on the ground floor that had a large sliding glass door in the living room. It was a fairly nice apartment complex. It had blinds which we often left open during the day to let light in, but we always closed them at night. One day I was sitting in the room watching TV. It was late afternoon and the blinds were open. I fell asleep. A few hours later I woke up, and it was dark out, and I hadn't had any lamps on earlier, so the room was pitch black. It was then that I sensed movement outside, and I heard somebody trying to open the door. Luckily it was locked, and after a few moments the person gave up and left. The room was dark enough that I don't think I had been seen, but it freaked me out. The next morning I reported it to the leasing office, and they said they'd alert the security guard. I never heard anything more and it never happened again. No idea if the guy was caught or not. Damn, that was scary. My ex broke in through my back door one night in an attempt to kidnap my 2-year-old son. He went into my son's room looking for him, but because he usually slept with me, he wasn't in there. I heard something fall to the floor from my room next door. Heard him say sheet. I grabbed the baseball bat from beside my bed and waited. I had no idea who was in my house, so I just stayed quiet and hoped that they wouldn't bother with my room because the door was shut. I hid my son in the closet in a clothes basket. He didn't wake up. I heard him walking down the hallway and grabbing my doorknob. The door opened and I watched him come in and walk over to my bed and hover. I swung as hard as it was in me to swing and cracked him right on the side of the head. I called the cops and went to my boyfriend's house for the night. Cops found him unconscious and bleeding next to the tree outside. He had the gall to place a restraining order on me. The judge laughed at him and asked me if I knew who was in my house that night. Honestly, no, I didn't. As far as I was concerned, I was protecting my child, and it didn't matter who was coming into my home. They were gonna be on the receiving end of a Louisville Slugger. My boyfriend, now husband, thinks it's funny when people ask him if I'm okay staying at home alone with the kids when he's gone for work. He simply says you should ask her ex lol. Back when I was about 15 or so, I had a little flat all to myself. Of course I was up as long as I wanted, and it was already quite light outside. It was summer, and about 4 to 5 am. Was chilling and listening to music on my PC when suddenly I heard someone knocking on the door. My heart started pounding so hard, because, obviously, I wasn't waiting for any visitors at this time. I creeped quietly closer to the front door and someone knocked again. This time with more urgency. We didn't have a peephole, so there was no way of identifying who that could have been. At one point I heard voices, so I guess there was a female and a male behind my door. They started touching the handle and wanted to pull open the door. At this point I'm sheeting myself, frozen in fear and unable to do anything. This kept on going for about an hour until they finally left. Anticlimactic, but it was one of the more terrifying things that has happened to me. They were probably some drunk friends or something of the previous owner. From this day on, I get uncomfortable when someone is knocking on the door. It's creepy AF. Late to the party, but I'd like to share it anyway. Point in December 2016, my dad was hospitalized for about a week after removing one rib that was messing up his blood vessels. My mom and I would take turns to keep him company in his room. Point, because it was December and my mom is pretty festive, we had the house decorated. One particular piece of decoration is a small singing Christmas tree with 2 eyes and a mouth that are concealed until the tree starts singing carols. It only activates through a little movement sensor on top of its mouth. Point, it was a late Friday night, about 2 am, and it was raining like hell. I was watching horror movies and chatting with a couple of friends on my PC upstairs with most of the lights on at my house, almost dozing off sitting in my chair. What kept me from sleeping while sitting down was the fact that the faking small tree started singing in the living room downstairs out of the blue. I was already a bit scared of the movie I was watching, and the tree singing out of nowhere froze me. Point, it took me a while to process what could be going on. I messaged a couple of friends telling what happened and that I was going to check out if anything had caused the noise. I grabbed a softball bat and walked downstairs, only to find all the entrances to the house properly locked and the tree that now had stopped singing sitting where it should be. I took off its batteries, put it away, and ended up brushing it off as nothing but a small bug with the tree's sensor, but I ain't taking that thing out of its box anymore. Point, edit, the tree. I don't know if this counts, but a few months ago I experienced a really bad case of sleep paralysis. I had just gotten home from school and collapsed into my bed, falling asleep instantly. I woke up a bit later to the sound of shouting and banging on my neighbor's door. I tried to move, but I was frozen in fear and could do nothing as I heard my neighbor's little girl scream and cry until there was a gunshot and then silence. The silence was what truly terrified me, and I tried to get up and hide in my closet, maybe call the cops, but my body just wouldn't cooperate. Then I heard my sister's dogs barking as someone banged against my back door. At this point I started to vaguely realize that something wasn't right. The lighting in my room was yellow and unnatural, and the sounds were echoing in a way that they shouldn't, but I barely spared those thoughts a moment as I struggled to move. All of a sudden, I felt a pain in my back. There were more gunshots, accompanied by the sound of shattering glass, and I couldn't breathe. The pain in my back only got worse and worse, until I simply stopped feeling. I was no longer struggling to breathe, and I felt no pain, but instead felt strangely detached, as though I was a third party watching the scenario unfold. Then the banging stopped, and my back door slammed open. There were heavy footsteps that I faintly registered had to belong to a man before my bedroom door creaked open. I was laying with my back to my door, so I couldn't see what was happening, and I shut my eyes. Maybe if I played dead this unknown man would leave me alone. Maybe there was a chance I could get out alive. But all hope fled when I felt a weight settle on my bed and cold hands make their way to my throat. I kept my eyes shut tight. I didn't want to look, Didn't want to know what was happening, as invisible hands tightened around my neck and what little breath I didn't know I still had was forced out of me. I tried to open my eyes, tried to fight back, but at that point everything went dark, and I went numb again. A few seconds or minutes passed, and I could open my eyes again. The lighting was back to normal, and while I could hear my sister's dogs barking, there was no strange echo. I realized at that moment that I had had a nightmare, but I was still alive, and just started sobbing. I don't like crying, but gods, I thought for sure that I had been killed twice over. I was absolutely terrified of coming home and falling asleep alone for a few weeks afterwards, so I stayed out until it was about time for others to get home before heading back. To this day, I'm still a bit apprehensive about falling asleep when I'm the only one in the house, because the thought of something happening to me while there is nobody else around to witness or to call for help fills me with an indescribable dread. It's been a while and I haven't had any more episodes as terrifying as this one, but now that I know what my mind can come up with, I'm dreading the next incident, whenever it may be. TLDR, some dude literally walked into my apartment and started screaming for my psycho room. At the time point it's the middle of the night. I hear someone yelling my psycho roommates, PR, coming from my living room. I assume it's PR's boyfriend, who was living in this tiny apartment illegally, so I opened the door to yell at them to shut his drunk ass up. He was always drinking literally from the moment he walked into the apartment the day after she moved in. Anyway, it not PR's boyfriend is some dude I've never met yelling and screaming asking for her. It's the middle of the night. I'm wearing tiny as PJ shorts and a tank top, and this dude I've never met is standing in my bedroom doorway yelling at me. Turns out PR's boyfriend went out and left the door unlocked because he didn't have a key, because he wasn't supposed to live there, and that led to the events that occurred. Somehow I had the composure to just insist that guy left, or I would call the police. He would take a step back, and I would fill the space telling him cops were coming, until he eventually went up the stairs and left. Pretty early in the morning, about 7ish, I was home alone. My parents were out of town and were sleeping in the back bedroom that had windows looking out to the fenced-in backyard, when suddenly I heard a big bang. Sounded like something had hit the house. Startled awake and crept over, peeked through the blinds, and saw a ladder against the wall in our fenced-in backyard. Suddenly I heard footsteps on the roof. Again, having no clue what the heck was going on, grabbed my cell phone, still in PJs, but intended to run outside to my car, drive down the road and call police. As soon as I opened the front door, this guy was standing there, and I froze, not knowing what to do at that point until he finally spoke and identified himself as an agent from the homeowner's insurance company. He claimed he came to inspect the roof. I asked for identification. He showed it seemed legit. Asked if he could go on the roof one more time. I told him no way and to leave before I got the cops on his tail. He left, but I've never been so freaked out before. I was 14. I'm playing SWTOR and blasting the game volume into my headphones, with the only light in the room being the light of my monitor. My brother was out getting Chipotle and my mom was seeing a movie with a friend. My dad doesn't live with us. All of a sudden, I hear a faint bit of talking, but it doesn't sound like it's coming from the game. I take my headphones off to find an eerie ghost-like voice saying something, but it's just quiet enough to not fully understand what it's saying. I'm in a panic, heart beating around 180, when all of a sudden it stops. I sighed in relief, only to hear the voice return but laughing, then a loud crash. I was legitimately thinking, is this how I did by some scary thing that's out to get me? For whatever reason I hadn't turned a light on yet. I come to my senses and turn a light and immediately spot the issue. My brother's Amazon Alexa was in the room. I shout, "Alexa, stop," and the demonic voice stops. Yeah, so it turns out that bang was my dog. He jumped off the couch really hard. And that demonic noise, it was Alexa playing a Hotel Transylvania alarm that my brother set for 10 PM instead of 10 AM. But it was just quiet enough for me not to realize it was just saying random nonsense.